All right, guys, welcome to the Peak Performance 40 podcast. Today, this is really interesting for me. So, people may know me as a master kettlebell instructor, but the funniest thing about that to me is it's a made up title from a made up organization and actually doesn't come with any real credentials that you have to have at all. Just that the company had to like you and like the way you presented to be a master instructor. But today I've actually got two Master of Sport kettlebell instructors, and the cool thing about that is MS is a internationally recognized standard to hit. They don't just hand them out because they like you or you've got the right haircut or you wear the right pants. You've definitely got to earn them. So, guys, why don't you introduce yourself? Levi, we'll start with you because you jumped on first. Let's do some quick introductions.
Okay, Levi Markwart. I'm from the U.S. and 46. Recently have stopped competing in kettlebell sport, but I was or had achieved master in sport in long cycle and achieved world class in single bell pentathlon with the IKMF. And so I do have a little bit of experience, and I have a gym in the U.S. and I do some online coaching.
Fantastic. And Anthony, how about you, mate?
I got into kettlebell sport in 2010. I was in America. So first, I'm from Sydney. I run a little studio here called 100 Strong. Yeah, so I got into kettlebell sport in 2010. I learned first from Valery Fedorenko. Got a Master of Sport in Biathlon 2013 from Sergey Rudnev. And then 2017 to 2018, those 2 years, I learned from Ivan Denisov, and that was my biggest learning curve. So after learning from that guy, 7 years later, I consider myself pretty good.
That three pretty big names there for people who are familiar with kettlebells with Fedorenko, Denisov, and Rudnev. So that's pretty good credentials.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
so the main topic today is, so if I'm a 40-year-old beginner, right, and I go, time poor and I want to get in shape and this kettlebell thing looks attractive. I've seen him on Joe Rogan and like where do I start? So, the common place I started, and back then there wasn't a huge amount of info about kettlebell sport. You basically bought Pavel's books or you watched some Steve Cotter DVDs. Those were pretty much the two choices of places to start. If someone's coming in the door and says to you, like I want to start using kettlebells, what do you guys suggest? Like, Levi, what's your go-to for intro training for the middle-aged person?
So I started with the RKC as well, and I honestly believe that from a beginner standpoint, that the hardstyle method is very easy to learn and very easy to teach. And so, we'll go through some basic progressions to make sure they can hinge properly and squat properly. And, obviously we talk about injury history and, what their goals are. But, once a person can learn to hinge safely, if they have injuries or just detrained, once they can learn to hinge safely and squat safely, then, we kind of progress from there. The more I coach and the more I teach and program for people, I become less strict with how they move. Once you're 40, you've got some nicks, and so we're gonna do our best to work around that kind of stuff and allow a person to move how they move and not get overly worried about how robotic you are or how perfect your breathing is or anything like that. So we're just going to continue to slowly work to improve. Obviously, there's going to be optimal movement patterns for every individual, but we have to learn what those are first. And so it's an easy break-in period for a lot of those people.
I agree. I think that's something hardstyle does really well. We're probably going to bash hardstyle a fair bit on this, but as a beginner method, I think it's fantastic because the people learn really strong cueing when they go to the cert. That's really what the cert is mostly about, is about teaching how to exercise properly. And then the students will learn some pretty safe form. It's got some, it's not universal, but it's close to universal in terms of the form cues, like make sure people squat with their feet flat on the ground kind of stuff. But it's interesting you mentioned about not looking for perfect form anymore. And I think, do you guys know who Percy Cerruti is? You probably do, Antony, but
No, I haven't heard of
he's
him.
a very famous Australian running coach. So a lot of people are still quoting this guy. He trained Herb Elliott, who was one of the great middle distance runners. And his big thing was, I don't actually care how people run. I just care that they can run. Like, I want them to come back from their 2-hour run looking fresh. And, like if they're doing some kind of weird thing, but they're still going fast, I don't bother trying to correct it needlessly. And it's interesting you brought that up. And I think GS seems a lot looser in that sense. I don't mean in a negative way. I mean, in the terms of finding a way to make it fit your body. And Anthony, I mean, we've talked about your T-spine extension and your ability to move well, to do jerks and things like that. Has that influenced where you started from? Is that why you went straight to GS?
Yeah, it was because I just had a really good overhead position. So, and I had the ability to relax. I wasn't particularly strong when I first started kettlebell lifting. I just had really good T mobility. The ability to relax and that, oh man, I took off pretty quickly with it. I did my first, I was messing around with the kettlebells in 2009. And I came in it through Pavel and everything as well, but just reading the books beforehand. So there was a gym I was working at that he had all the Pavel books. So I got it, Pavel was like the gateway drug. And then late 2009, I got Catherine Imes as a coach. She trained under Valery Fedorenko. In 2010, I was in America for my best mate's wedding, and there was a workshop on the week before. So I just got myself to the Valery Fedorenko workshop, came back about 3 months later. My first comp, the jerk videos are online somewhere, but I did 111 jerks with 224s. And it was mostly just because I could just rest. I could just rest with my arms above my head. So, yeah. It really, just coming back to the basics
in the
there.
RKC days.
Yep.
In the RKC days, I mean, that's punishment. Like people get sent for walks, teach them overhead positions, and it's super stressful for people, and it's really hard. And here you are saying, "Yeah, I just rest with 48 kilo overhead." That's quite it says a lot about your mobility.
Yeah. So that was definitely. But then I'm still working on cardio today. My weak spot was cardio. So yeah, it's a never-ending battle.
When a beginner comes in your gym, are you splitting it like 50-50 and suggesting, hey, we're going to do this kettlebell stuff, but I need you to be doing this cardio stuff on your own?
Yeah, it's I pretty much do the same thing as Levi. So, I'll look at their squat first. I always say if you can teach somebody to do a good squat, you're going to fix up, a lot of stuff gets fixed through a good squat. So, I'll just work on their basic movement patterns. And then, and then look, I try to get them to do some cardio on the side, but you know how people are. Some people come see you 2 or 3 times a week. That's all they're going to do. So, I do my best.
Yeah. I always found with my gym, the customers who were standouts in terms of how awesome they were, like particularly when we'd have like a throwdown kind of workout, they were the ones doing reliable outside cardio, at least 2, but probably more like 3 times a week. So they come to the gym 3 times and then go for a bike ride or a run for 30 plus minutes a few times a week. And the difference it made in their work capacity was extraordinary. Between just the regular 3 gym sessions versus, the guys doing obviously double. I mean, it sounds so simple, right? But when you're doing double, the results really stand out.
Yeah.
So Levi, though, your cardio is still circuit style training, isn't it? Like I watch a lot of your videos. It seems like a lot of your work capacity stuff is still like your main thing, which is based around kettlebells still.
Yeah, I've got a wrestling background. I wrestled through college, and I got my start. I gained a lot. Well, I wrestled heavyweight. I wasn't a great cardio machine by any means in college. But after I decided to get healthy, I had been introduced to Ross Enamite, and I really just gravitated towards his style of training. I read all of his books, and that's kind of what kind of got me into, like, when I first started to get healthy after college, after I had a loss in my life, and that was my wake up call, and it was a lot of sledgehammer swinging and burpees, and it was just one of those things where, like, I'm just going to go work. It was just how much work can I get done in a given amount of time, and I just kind of tried to build from there, and I really kind of just fell in love with that feeling of exhaustion because it reminded me of wrestling. That's kind of that was the connection I made. And I never enjoyed, the classic barbell lifts, squat, deadlift, bench press, overhead press. It was just never something that I gravitated towards, but I loved sledgehammer swings. and I grew to love burpees. And I know that sounds weird to probably everybody listening, but that was kind of something that I could, it felt like it was familiar. And so once I got my life kind of back, my physical life back in order, I kind of eventually was introduced to the kettlebells, and that's kind of how I got my start with that. So I go back to what I know and what's familiar to me. And so, yeah, I love doing burpees. I will use a row machine, and I will use a ski erg, and I like to bike when the weather's nice. We only have a couple months a year here where I'm brave enough to go out in the weather to ride a bike. But that's kind of, yeah. I've just always I took that mindset. I had a coach tell me once that I should, if I'm gonna be a good wrestler, that I should never actually be out of shape. I should never have to work to get back into shape. And I just, like any young teenager in the U.S., I didn't really take it serious until it's like maybe he knew what he was talking about. Now that I've gotten into shape, I never want to get. It's too hard to get back into shape. It's. I don't have any plans on competing in long cycle again. But damn it, I'm not going back to where I started from. I did way too much work to get to the level that I got to lose it. So I long cycle 3 times a week, or I half snatch 3 times a week with 2 bells, just because if I ever decide I want to do that again, then I'm not starting over. So that's kind of where I'm at with that.
Most of my clients never stop. So even when they go on holidays, I program in, even if it's just like 20 minutes of bodyweight stuff in a hotel room, like they make sure they keep the taste, because they've realized that, hey, at 45, 50, excuse me, if you get out of shape, it's way worse getting back in shape the older you get. So, I got super sick this year in Nepal, like in April. It's now nearly December, and I'm still not back to where I was before I went away. So, it had taken me literally a lifetime to get that fit to climb big mountains. And now I've gotten sick. I'm 6 months later, I'm still not even close to that shape. So whether I can even get back there, I don't actually know. So definitely need to stay in shape. But because you mentioned Ross, have you done the Magic 50?
Yeah.
One of my all-time favorite, short, intense workouts. Anthony, have you done Magic 50? Do you know what it is?
No. What's that?
So it's 10 swings, 10 snatches, 10 burpees. So 10 swings each hand, 10 snatches each hand, 10 burpees. And you do each 5 times, so you get 50 reps of each, and you go as fast as you can.
I'm going to have to, I'll give this a go.
But I got to go back to the beginning question. If the beginners are coming into your gym, are they snatching and burping to get in shape?
Not at my gym.
So what kind of stuff is a beginner doing then on their non-lifting days in your gym?
Yeah. Well, like Anthony had shared, that if I can get somebody to do anything, on a day that they're not training with me, I'll be lucky to get them to do more than walking.
Yeah.
Just whether it's life stress or family business or whatever. I would assume that Australians and Americans are similar in that we've got a full plate, whether it's by design or whether it's because we're just inefficient. But it's one of those.
And the health statistics are the same. So our country is just as overweight as yours. We
Sure.
just have less people, so it's not quite as visible, but statistically it's the same.
Okay. And so, yeah, it would be one of those things where I just want my people moving to begin with. And so, yeah, but if somebody comes in detrained, yeah, I don't program burpees for somebody that's detrained. I don't program snatches for someone that's detrained. We'll definitely work with, the swings and the squats. And we might even do more planks and dead bugs and things like that. Even some anything to get that heart rate up and to keep it up, low impact stuff. I don't program running for anyone unless that's what they want to do or they've got a running background. And even with kettlebell stuff, I'm competing and made me a form. If you're going to compete, I want you to train like you're competing. And so your overhead fixation matters, your alignment matters, all that kind of stuff. But if you don't have any desire to compete, as long as you're not going to hurt yourself, I kind of let things go, because I want people to come in and enjoy it versus, worry me cracking a whip on them. So,
yeah. And is that same with you, Anthony? Like guys aren't coming in and they're doing like biathlon workouts straight away. I mean, like you got to build them up, right? Like what are they starting with?
Yes. So basically, like everybody who comes through my door, the first thing is I do 3 basic. I don't have time. Most of my sessions are 45 minutes. Some are an hour. I don't have time to do a lot of stretching, but I do work the 3 stretches that I'll work on with everyone. would be just sitting in a squat, just the basics, really just sitting in a squat, a split stance, like a hip stretch, and hang, just hanging from a bar. So I'll do those 3 stretches with everybody that comes through the door.
I just need to point this out. So, because, and this is one of these like hard style versus sport things. I'm not going to name him, but there's quite a well-known master instructor who's one of the older ones, and he's like, "Well, we'll just hang and we'll just squat." And I think that's not a bad place to start, right? But you see already, like the experience you've got is that we actually need this other thing as well.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, like to me, straight away, I always look for similarities, but then I wanted to understand the differences. And you know, if we look at what most people have going on all day, they're way too cramped, right? Hips are
Yeah.
flexed. If I sit in a squat, aren't I just flexing my hips even more?
Exactly.
And so you've addressed that, whereas someone coming from the other side of things has missed that completely, which I think is quite interesting.
Yeah, yeah. So no, that's exactly right. Where most people are sitting down for most of the day, so you have to do something to combat that. So after that, I do a bit of barbell stuff in here as well. So usually I'll teach them how to do a barbell squat, push up. So when we're talking about somebody that's very deconditioned, I'll set like the bar up at a certain height and get them doing, push ups on a bar. And then as they
Yeah, like
get
an
better,
incline.
I'll start, yeah, an incline, that's it. And as they get better, as they get better, I'll, bring the bar closer to the ground because most people, like I'm talking about 95% of the people I'll see can't do a single push up.
We just said that before you jumped on, like, you know, and it'd be the same for you. Like when I started in the fitness industry in, I don't even know when it was, like 2000, 2002 or something, like around there. That can't be right. Is that right? I need another few years on that. Like 94 or something. Anyway, the the standard, like everyone came in, they could do push-ups, they could squat, most people could run. Whereas now, not uncommon that people can't even do a handful of push-ups.
Yeah. Man, I've seen some people with the conditioning of like a 5-year-old. So it's like that they've literally never learnt it. So yeah, I think
I
we were
went
the
and
last.
watched the police physical a while ago. So this is about 5 years ago or so. So Vic Pol's got pretty low standards, my state police, Levi. In fact, he's got the lowest standard of any state in Australia in terms of the physical standards to get in. So the beep test was a 6 back then. Just for some reference, like firefighters, it's 9.5. So that you see the difference in fitness expectation is double. But they had to do 5 push-ups, and people were failing 5 push-ups. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, how can you not do? How do you think you're going to arrest someone when you're not even strong enough to do 5 push-ups?
Yeah. Well, in the U.S., along those lines, once you pass it, like you don't have to do it again. And
Yeah,
so,
same.
Yeah,
I mean, it's crazy to think that the amount of, and I am a big law enforcement supporter. I've got many that are in my gym, but the amount, and I don't say this to be rude. Maybe I should say it to be rude, but that's not my intent. But yeah, it's embarrassing
Yeah,
I just don't know what the expectation is,
yeah.
how it can be, how we can go so far the other direction. We're not going to have, I mean, wars are going to be fought by pushing buttons.
Well,
There's not
yeah,
going to be any more
yeah.
soldiers. I don't know.
Well, and that's actually I did, man, a while ago before COVID, so like 5 years ago at least. I ran a private FMS course for the Australian Army. Well, it's the Defence Force, so it's actually all three services. Their combined PTI school, and it was interesting because obviously the three services see physical training very differently. Like if you're training pilots, they basically have to sit still. The most important thing training pilots is keeping their neck healthy because of the G forces. A lot of them end up with neck injuries. The Navy guys are getting a brand new group of 100 recruits every month. So, you know, they've got to get people from entry standard to exit standard as safely as possible. And for those guys, they said the hardest part was actually that they were so unfit. They reckon they realistically needed double the time to get them through, you know, that period between entry and exit more safely. but the standard's the standard. Recruits is this long. You've got to hit this at the end. We don't have extra time, or you just get rolled back to the next class. So people can't even pass the fitness standards. They can get in, but they can't actually meet the expectation to leave.
Okay.
So a 12-week recruit process, they can't gain enough fitness over that period of time without getting hurt. And it's the Navy. It's not even like it's special forces or like some, like you said, I mean, most jobs in the military are the same as law enforcement. They're sitting on your butt. So, they're not exactly being set at a very high standard. Now, back to beginner training. There's obviously online, there's a lot of really common kettlebell programs. I feel like they basically come in two main varieties. One is like nonsense flow stuff. And you see people doing like exercises. And even if it's not flow, it's just I'm holding a kettlebell in my hand, so it's kettlebell training. And you got people doing like bicep curls and tricep extensions and stuff. And then the other version seems to be complexes. And that's pretty much the only two things that really seem to be commonly sold. Surely there's a better middle ground for someone to start with than that stuff.
I definitely think so. As the three of us are coaches ourselves, and I've actually, I speaking for myself, but I'm sure for both of you as well. Like, I hire out when I need a program, to prepare for my competitions. I hire out, and so like and anything is often better than nothing, but the amount of people that just decide to, hop on a social media forum and just, ask a bunch of strangers, what to do, or follow strangers and just try to copy. Like you said, it ends up being,
what do I get for free?
Yeah, what do I get for free? And it ends up being, a flow, or it ends up being, just one complex on repeat. And again, like, I'm glad you're moving. Please keep moving. But if you've got any kind of specific goal, I mean, there's no better return for your investment than actually hiring somebody to do what you need to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And Tony seems to have dropped out just briefly there. He'll be back in a second. One of the things for me with these, particularly the complex sort of stuff, it's a handful of moves. I mean, the most famous one, let's be honest, probably Simple and Sinister. I know it's not a complex, but it's 2 moves. And, this idea that you get everything you need from 2 things, I think it's back to front. I think you get very good at those 2 things very quickly because you're constantly practicing them. But I actually think they're holding people back because all of a sudden you're neglecting all these other stuff. Like you said, I'm happy you're moving, but maybe there's more ways to move than just 2 of them. Have you seen, like, I don't know if they're negatives, but like that knock-on effect from removing stuff from training as people get older?
Sorry, what was that?
So I feel like as you get older, if you remove movements from training, you get back. And so, like, if I'm a beginner, I'm coming in, I'm just going to do these 2 things. And while those 2 things have got a lot of different movements in them, you're still missing out on a lot of other movements.
Definitely. Yeah. If we're talking about swings and get-ups, I mean, that's a great starting point. And when you're good at swings and get-ups, you're just scratching the surface. I mean, now, nothing against swings, but as soon as we learn how to swing in my gym, we don't swing really anymore. There's so much, there's so much better things for the return on your investment. What's that?
How are you going to cure cancer like that?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. No, but in all seriousness, is like once we know how to swing safely, then okay, let's take the training wheels off and let's actually get some work done now. And that's kind of what the process has been for us the last, I'm trying to think here, the last 15 years now with kettlebells is, I just, as you probably know, my whole thing is 2 bells overhead. And so as soon as I can get somebody to get 2 bells overhead, and I'd much prefer them to be ballistically, as opposed to a strict press. Not that there's anything wrong with the strict press, but once you can strict press, fine. Again, we're moving on to some other things that will, I believe, have a higher return on the investment that you're putting in.
I'm going to come back to that because the topic of power is interesting as we age.
Yeah.
I'm going to come back to that in a minute. Anthony, what about you?
Yeah.
You probably missed that part of the discussion.
Yeah,
we were talking about how some of these like minimalist, complex kind of programs, and we use Simple and Sinister as an example. Just 2 movements. I mean, you get really good at them fast, but you exclude a lot of other stuff. No, his internet's gone again. Let's get back to the power set question then. So I know
Sorry, you
that
just
as
cut
people
out.
age, what the current studies are showing is the big problem is not just loss of strength, but it's loss of power. And is that why you're focused on ballistic lifts for people?
Not only that, I mean, obviously, there's a little bit larger learning curve, and it takes a bit longer to get to that point. But getting more load overhead safely, I think is what we need to be, in my opinion, what has been the best return for me and a lot of the people that I work with. And so again, you start where you are. There's no reason to try to jerk if you can't strict press, but if you can strict press, and then you can learn to push press, and we just want to continue to build and get stronger and more efficient with our movements. And then again, you're working on your positioning, so your alignment, your overhead fixation, and the more efficient you become, then you can start really getting those gains by increasing the load or increasing the pace, doing more reps. There's nothing wrong with density training, as far as like doing more work in the same amount of time.
Well, I think kettlebells lend themselves very well to density training over just straight pushing up volume or constantly trying to jump up to the next bell. I think kettlebells really work very well there.
I completely agree. We, in America anyway, we're quick to try to do, and I just talked about using more load, but that seems to be the first thing we try to do is put more load on. The one thing that I had to learn or relearn with my coach in programming is, we build to 10 minutes, then we increase pace, and then we add load, as far as, building that
That's
performance
interesting because
for,
it's volume first.
yeah.
Yeah, and I agree. I think volume is, like, if you look at the history of athletic training, more training always brings more success. Like, there's very few cases where more training is actually detrimental to people, whereas more intensity can it can work, but it's just about the same amount of likelihood that it's going to create problems for people.
Yeah. Oh, and you very rarely run into somebody that has problems with intensity if they have the base built by volume. It's the people that get inspired by watching somebody online or somebody else in the gym, and they want to jump up too soon if they don't have the skill or the technique or just even the strength to hold something, depending on what they're doing. But yeah, it's super easy to try to progress too quickly with intensity versus volume.
Do you think Instagram adds to that? I mean, on Instagram, let's be honest, like, bent press looks sexy on Instagram. Bottoms up looks sexy on Instagram. Heavy for 1 or 2 reps for my 30-second reel looks good on Instagram. Whereas, I mean, a 10-minute set, you're not putting a 10-minute set as a reel on Instagram. Like, no one's going to watch that
No,
for starters. I mean, so volume is not sexy at all.
and it's painful.
I remember.
Yeah. No, you're right though. I mean, I actually built my following, if you want to call it that, on get ups and bent press, just because I'm a part of, definitely a part of the problem, as far as years ago, before I got into the sports side of things. It was about, I'm going to do some crazy stuff and try to get more views and more likes and all that kind of stuff, and I would never train someone how I was doing just to get views and clicks and shares and all that kind of stuff. Not that I'm special, but the more I learn, and I'm probably pretty lucky that nothing stupid happened, because just constantly trying to push the envelope for more views, and my daughter used to get so frustrated with me. She's like, "Dad, this is dumb. Like, nobody cares. You're just going to get hurt." It's just one of those things where, and she was right. But looking back now, they're fun to watch, that, the memories that pop up on social media. But man, there's no way that as a guy in his 40s, there's no way, mid 40s, no way would I pursue that life.
So you're telling me you're not showing bent presses to middle-aged beginners? I'm shocked.
No,
Surely
not
the bent press is the king of lifts, isn't it?
it is. I've heard that.
I remember.
I remember actually when I came back from level 2, right? So, like, that's the bent press workshop basically. Like, you do some jerks and some other stuff, but level 2 is pretty much windmills and bent presses. Oh, and pistols. And one of the top rugby teams in the country got in touch with me, wanting me to show them some kettlebell stuff, thinking that there was going to be like some magic formula that a Russian American who's never played rugby could like mold into their training style. And I went along and had a look, and I mean, rugby players are like, man, they're like 220 plus in
Yeah.
terms of, so like 100 plus kilo. And this is, for people who know rugby, this is rugby league, not rugby union. The players tend to be bigger in rugby league because it's a little bit, so there's two styles of rugby. One is very free flowing, which is the one you see more commonly internationally. And then the other one is a little bit stop start. It's actually a little bit more like, and so the league players, these massive, big, strong dudes, they're basically powerlifters who can catch a ball.
Okay.
And, like, is the kettlebell going to fit in with these guys? Maybe for some assistance work.
Sure.
But, I mean, I was like, I'm not teaching you guys how to bench press. I doubt your players are even flexible enough to get in that position. But it was interesting that even, and the guy who was the head strength coach, super experienced, incredibly knowledgeable, super qualified as well, like PhD kind of level exercise science guy with a physiotherapy degree as well. Like, I mean, you can't ask for someone with a better sports background. And even he got sucked into the tree swinging traps and Android-like work capacity and all this other stuff, despite his history of really knowing at a high level what was working and what wasn't.
That marketing is powerful.
It is. I mean,
Yeah.
and that's actually, I mean, Anthony, like you said, you started with the Enter the Kettlebell kind of stuff, the powerful stuff. Was
Yeah.
that the thing that got your attention, or was it just the odd implement?
It was probably just the odd implement because, the marketing. Look, I just don't understand the marketing side of things. Like the move like a leopard. Oh my God. If you just go, for people listening, if you just go onto Kindle and download the free sample and, oh my fucking God, like...
Or go read some of the long copy on the Dragon Door website.
You only have to move for 5 seconds like a cat because the cat's the predator and you want to be the predator. Seriously. So, look, I just don't understand it. Just the marketing side of things, that people actually believe that is just, it's beyond me. Look, I just think there's a certain amount of people want to believe something that's going to make them comfortable. So if I tell you, you don't need to do hours of cardio, you don't need to do a 5-minute clean and jerk set, you can just do like a 20-second set with a 5-minute rest in between. That's all you need. There are some people, they just want to believe it, so they will.
Well, and when that first started being popular, all I can remember thinking is the guy suggesting it, and we know who it is, but the guy suggesting it hasn't trained anyone in a long time. Because I tell you now, the commercial reality of being a coach is if someone comes in your gym and they do like 30 seconds of work in an hour-long workout, they're going somewhere else. That person is not going to leave, like they're not going to stick around long enough to even see what the possible results of that training is. They want to leave sweaty. They want to, they want to feel like they've worked hard. There's a psychological side to the training beyond the physical side. And no one is sticking around for those workouts because they're going to be bored out of their brains.
Yeah.
And we were talking about some beginner intro stuff, and I'm interested to get your opinions. We'll start with you, Anthony. I've always held that kettlebells are not a two-handed implement. I mean, you can't even get two hands on them to begin with, right? Like this is the best you get. And so to me, two-hand swing, goblet squat, which are probably the two most common two-hand exercises, those are like intro sort of patterning exercises. And the moment I can see someone can do it safely with like a little bit of stress, we get away from two-hand, we go to one hand. What do you think?
Yep, 100%. So I just teach two-hand swings at the beginning to get them to learn how to hinge. Yeah, squat because everyone should know how to squat. And then after that, we go straight onto the one-arm stuff. And I do mostly one-arm kettlebell lifts with the general public because, we're talking about, if we're talking about over 40s and people who, their mobility isn't what it used to be, lifting one kettlebell is a lot easier than two. Have you heard about kettlebell pentathlon at all?
I have, but explain it to everyone else who hasn't.
Yeah, Levi certainly has. So basically, Valeri came up with the pentathlon probably like 10 or 12 years ago now. And in short, traditional kettlebell lifting, it's not very user-friendly. If you get an average Joe and say, hey, you're going to lift 2 kettlebells for 10 minutes, 99% of the population is disqualified, right?
Well, it's brutal. I mean, you guys know,
Yeah,
but no one else knows. But I've been starting to play around with some sports stuff, and holy cow, even like a 3 minute set is
yeah,
awful. And
absolutely.
because you just like like I liken it to if you stub your toe, you tend to walk around and you don't feel how painful it is. But the moment you stop moving, you notice how painful it is. And sport, you're stood still. You feel all the pain. There's no hiding from it.
No. But yeah, so he did everything. The pentathlon, there's 5 different exercises. In a full pentathlon, you have a 6 minute set with a 5 minute rest in between. Everything's done with a single kettlebell, swapping hands as often as you want. And that was the user-friendly part
It is.
because
That's pretty accessible. You're right.
yeah, it's way more. It's a really good balanced fitness and strength kind of test. And then the other thing I would say is because there's a fair amount of pressing in it. It also, you get some of the bigger, stronger guys who can step up a bit to this one. So
What
having
about
a
5 events?
having a strong press doesn't really mean much for your jerk. You can have a weak press and a strong jerk. But some of the bigger guys, because you have a clean and press and a push press in the pentathlon, they can use their upper body a bit to their advantage and get a better score. So yeah, it's just a good rounded balance. Fitness, mobility,
What
strength.
are the what are the 5 events? So we've got clean and
Okay.
press, clean and push press. You said. I'm assuming clean and jerk, snatch, and what's the other one?
Yes, so the first one is clean, so it's just clean only. And then you have clean and press, then jerk, then half snatch, then push press at the end. So
Wow.
those are the 5. The only thing I would say that beginners struggle with is their hands. So there's a lot of callus tears. There's a lot of callus tearing for beginners in this one because there's just a lot going on with your hands there. They also they set a pace. You can't do for cleans, for example, you've got 120 reps you can do. If you finish before 6 minutes, you can put the bell down, but you can't do more than 120 reps. You won't get any extra points after that. And then there's a system where you get a point for, I don't know, Levi, do you know how much points per 8 kilos or per 4 kilos?
Yeah, just the heavier belly you use, the more points you get per rep.
Yeah. So, but you want to try and balance it out because if you go heavier and let's say you only do 100 reps instead of 120, you might get fewer points. So, yeah, there's a bit of a balancing act you got to do there. You basically want to go for maximum reps with the heaviest weight you can do, and then of course it's about picking the right weights because you can clean a lot more than you can press, right? So, yeah, people tend to go really heavy on the first one.
Half snatch because it's obviously less technical than full snatch.
I don't know. Levi, you got any thoughts on that one?
I couldn't tell you why Valerie chose half snatch over snatch, but I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it's a better movement for the mass population. I don't
Yeah.
I don't teach the classic snatch to anybody unless they're going to want to compete. I think the return on a half snatch is higher simply because it's less taxing on your grip and your bicep from the drop from overhead versus the drop from rack, and it's still very taxing as far as getting it to overhead in one motion. So it's again, it's easier on the grip, it's easier on the bicep, but it's harder in the snatch. You got to pull more with your upper body because there's less momentum. But yeah, it's a little bit slower movement as well, and so it's 18 reps a minute versus is a pretty quick pace, and that's what the max is in the pentathlon. But I prefer it more. But I also competed in half marathons and pentathlons, and so that's the event that I'm familiar with.
Yeah, so I usually break it down with newer clients and just do like a 2 or 3 minute pentathlon and, start from there because, yeah, normal people starting off with 6 minutes, they're going to tear calluses like
I would
100%.
imagine, like the classic RKC. I mean, it used to be the walk in the door standard, the snatch test. So when I went, you did it first thing on the first morning. So then someone rightfully came along and said, it seems a bit weird. We're testing this thing that we haven't even technically taught them yet. And they put it towards the end of the cert. I don't actually think it made a huge amount of difference in terms of how many people passed it or hurt their hands. because, by the third day, everyone's hands are pretty beaten up anyway. But for a newer client, I mean, a 5 minute non-stop set is pretty hard work. And you guys know, like when someone hasn't done even swings before and you get them to come in for the first time, you go, we're going to do a couple of sets of 10 swings. I mean, their heart rate's going to go through the roof.
Definitely. I remember learning to swing with a 24 and not knowing any better. And I was like, this is way harder than it should be. I don't know what. Yeah. So, and that was somebody that was, I mean, I was in shape. I was, doing all my burpees and sledgehammer swings at this point. And it's a different world for sure. And then you walking into the world of kettlebell sport, and that was a kick in the teeth for sure. That was such a humbling experience. I had so much ego and pride going into that. I either had to completely quit the industry or get better. That was my two options. It was such a humbling experience.
I think that's, I mean, we've talked a very little bit about it, but I remember, so like I joined the RKC at the point where Steve Cotter, Steve Maxwell, Mike Marler, and there was another guy who was a master instructor, and they had just left. And so that now we had this like second generation of guys. It was like Dave Whitley, Kenneth J, all those kind of people. But the big four, the early ones had left. And Steve Cotter went to a competition overseas, and exactly that, expected they were going to wipe the floor with everyone with their secret Russian training knowledge, and had a very different experience. And obviously he decided his eyes were open. He's like, well, hang on, I can actually see performance here, whereas I can only see, I'm going to say, marketing about performance over here. Like, and I was talking on Instagram a couple of weeks, Levi, I know you saw it, and someone saying like, what do you think about hardstyle? I was like, well, at this point, I think it's been around long enough that we can safely say that all of the performance stuff touted by it doesn't exist. And I'm not saying I think it's a great way for beginners and intermediates to learn and train. I think it's a great place for beginner level sort of coaches. And this isn't a diss. This is a statement about the fitness industry in general, because most people don't stick around for very long. But, like at least we can teach people safely. We can get them exercising safely. But all of this high performance that it says it has, it doesn't. And then we look at the sport guys. I mean, when I look at you guys, Kettlebell Warrior, Kettlebell Aerobics on Instagram, and then you look at some of the, the Vasilevs and those guys as well, like what they're doing. I mean, the difference is huge. There's actually real performance there. Is that like what you had as well? Like you went from your experience and then started looking at sport and was like, hang on, something that I thought was here isn't there?
I went to the Arnold. That was my first experience watching kettlebell sport live. I'd seen videos of Valerie online, and you watch the internet and it's, it's one thing, you watch videos and you don't really know what you're looking at. My experience with being at Hardstyle Certs, it was just, you just dismiss GS as some clown show, that
anything that's not our big six.
Right. Exactly.
I'm concerned by it.
And I walked into that just to see what it was like. And like, my mind was like blown. Like, I could not believe the amount of people doing clean and jerks with 32s that were so much smaller than me, and knowing that I wasn't going to be anywhere close to them, and just how much more efficient they were with their movements, and nothing was wasted. And that's one of those things where like, how can I say that I'm stronger when I can't do what they're doing? Why am I intentionally making things harder to do less work? Like, I just didn't, like, it just wasn't clicking with me once I saw it in real time. And I was like, man, I am missing so much. There's so much more out there. And at this time, like I said, I already built the following, and I was already cool. And I was like, man, I am nothing. I'm fake. I am a fraud. And then, well, I went the single bell route, because I knew that I couldn't do. I knew there was no way in hell I could do long cycle just from playing around with it in my gym. And I actually went and competed in Spain in half marathon, half snatch, 30 minutes of half snatch with a 32. And I had come back after competing with Team USA, and my coach had said, hey, because I was going to continue to build for this, and I was enjoying it. And my coach is like, "Hey, I need you to let's just see where you're at with long cycle, and we're gonna start using 2 bells in your programming to help build your conditioning with 1 bell." And I can remember thinking, "Coach, whatever, I'll play your silly game, you know." And his instruction was, "I want you to do up to 10 minutes of as many as you can do, and then but when you're done, you're done. Like if your form gets bad, sit them down. I just need a starting point." And I went into that session thinking, this is so dumb. I said, I compete for 30 minutes with a 32. I'm a master of sport.
10's going to be no problem.
10 minutes is a joke. What a waste of time. I'll do this 10 minutes and then I'll work out. I'll do my own workout after that. And I picked up and I said, I'm going to do 8 a minute for 10 minutes. I'm just going to knock it. Never done it before. And I'm going to do 80 reps. It should be a nice, easy warm up. And I went 8, 8, 6, 6, 6, and I quit. And I sent him a message. His name's Michael Sun. I sent Coach Michael a message and I said, "Don't you ever program long cycle for me again. I'm not going to do it. I'm a single bell athlete." You know, just this whole and I had never been crushed. Like it was the worst feeling ever. And I can't imagine how many of those reps that I counted wouldn't count. You know, it was just survival at that point. It was so ugly. But man, I'm so glad that I eventually woke up and humbled myself and was able to. But it was when I hit that actual master sport number in April of this year, it was like a lifetime achievement award. I was so relieved. It was such a long journey but yeah, what a humbling, and I don't know, there's no other word for it. I got a big ego and it was taken care of for sure.
Anthony, was that your experience too? Like from where you started and then you go along and with Fedorenko? I mean, and Fedorenko's the GOAT, right? Like I gotta imagine the stuff he's doing at workshops. He's probably just toying with the 32s for fun while he demos stuff and talks all the way through it.
Well, that actually brought back a memory. I did do a Steve Cotter workshop in, I think, 2008. And he was like, "Hey, I've got this new thing for everyone. It's kettlebell sport." So I remember doing that workshop and then not doing it. You know, I did nothing with the, kettlebell sport for a couple of years. But at the time, it's funny, we were talking about the marketing. I just remembered I took the fucking bait, hook, line and sinker as well. So I was doing the Pavel. Do you remember the Pavel program where there was like a one arm, I think it was a barbell, like a bent press with one arm and deadlift, and you do 2 sets of 5 every day?
Yeah, power to the people.
Power to the people, that's it. And what's his name? Starting Strength, Mark Ripito, does the same thing. So their math is this. Okay, let's say you can squat 30 kilograms, like a barbell squat of 30 kilograms, and you're a cycler, right? Well, if you can squat 60 kilograms, then each time you take a pedal on the bike, it's half the effort. So therefore, just get as strong as you can in the squat to be the best cyclist. If you're a 300 kilogram squatter, you're going to be the best cyclist in the world because you're just using a tiny little fraction of your energy for each pedal.
I had this same discussion with Pavel before I did Ironman. And he said you should be training only with the beast and like keep your deadlift at about 180 kilo. And I'm like, I don't think you've ever seen a triathlete, mate. Like, have you even stood next to someone who's done an Ironman? I could probably deadlift 3 Ironman triathletes without much effort. They're so puny. Like, the thing that makes you better at those sports is doing the sport, surprisingly.
Yeah. And look, I don't know if this was true, but the boss of, like the head trainer at the first gym I worked at would always say that with, what's his name, Poliquin. Poliquin's rule was you have to be able to squat your body weight 10 times to run, as in body weight on a bar. And I'm like, how many world-class running athletes can squat their body weight on a bar even for 1 rep? Probably most of them couldn't. So most to all.
And when you first got into the sports stuff, I mean, you said you weren't terribly strong to begin with. Where did you start? Were you at 12s or 14s? Or did you just jump straight up to the 32s like Levi?
No. So So that workshop, yeah, I was deadlifting and stuff at the time. That workshop, I was using a 16, and I was like, yeah, this, and I was swinging it for about 30 seconds. We were doing it for time, and 30 seconds I had to drop the bell. I was just fatigued. So I was like, this is really pathetic. And yeah, just, I realized at that point that, yeah, just lifting really heavy for 5 reps isn't going to make you fit. So surprise. Yeah, so then I think I didn't get into kettlebells, to kettlebell sport straight after that, though. I think that happened like a year or so later. Just probably, again, just watching Valery Fedorenko videos on YouTube. Oh, and then there was, remember Iron Edge, that was it. Do you remember did you ever go on the forum back in the day?
No, but I mean, that was my introduction to Steve Cotter as well, was when Iron Edge had him come out and run a series of workshops. So that 2008 workshop you went to, I probably went to the Melbourne version of the same workshop.
Yeah. Mate, they were doing so well back then. Yeah, so that
before they went bankrupt.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was all so that was all really good. Once I got into the sport, like at the beginning, I was like 27 at the time. So, you're young and you feel like you have something to prove. So I just pushed really, really hard. My technique wasn't as refined, but I just pushed really hard. I'd just go in and do 5 really intense sessions a week. And then it took years later, I got more refined with the technique, started working on slow cardio outside of kettlebell lifting. And then, so with the programming, I think it was, what's the guy's name again? Boris Sheko, the famous powerlifting coach. And people ask him for a program, and he's like, well, a program doesn't really mean anything. It's got to be a program for you. So, each person, they have to look at, what their weakness is. And, you have like a list of order from the, the most important thing you have to work on going down. And, So as you get each person in the gym, it's not like I have this one formula for everyone. You've got to look at what they need. Typically for over 40s, it's going to be mostly mobility and, adding slow cardio to their, training on the days outside of the gym. And again,
for me, the biggest thing I've noticed is, my overhead position, my thoracic extension is garbage.
Yeah.
And so actually a good overhead position takes a lot of work outside of training to even be able to hit that and not stress myself out too much being there.
Definitely.
Yeah. I'm miles away from your position. I've probably got T-spine more like yours, Levi. You look pretty stiff in the upper back as well. Like me.
Yep.
And it's always funny to me, like people going, you got to have strength. I'm like, from my perspective, and I'm a little bit older than you guys, and I actually used to run an old folks home as well. My family owned it and I worked in it for a while. And when you speak to the residents, the first loss of independence is when you can't put your shoes on your own anymore. You can't get down to your feet to put your shoes on. And so, like in my head always, I'm like, you've got to maintain basic ranges of motion, because the moment you can't put your shoes on or cut your toenails, that's the start. And it's a very quick downward spiral from there. I mean, I totally agree. I think mobility is really missed by a lot of the fitness industry. And that's, again, another thing that these, you're saying a program is really only a program if it's written for someone. And then we look at some of these really common programs, similar to Superstar, Dry Fighting Weight, ABC, like these things there's not a mobility emphasis at all in them. And they're generic, right? Like it's not written for you. It's got no actual thing that's taking into account, like Levi said, the dings that I've taken getting to 40, well, maybe I shouldn't be squatting, because maybe I've got hips that don't deal well with that, like me. Maybe there's some other stuff I should be doing, more lunging, single leg kind of stuff. But there's no program like that for me.
Yeah, that's the frustrating thing, is that we're just looking for the best quote unquote deal. But when you don't have any skin in the game, like what's gonna hold you accountable to doing that? And most of us, in my experience here in the US, if the adherence and follow through is very poor unless people are paying for it. Once they invest into themselves, and that's why I try to tell people, like you're not buying a program, you're making an investment into your number one resource. I have zero issue paying my coach whatever he wants to charge me because I'm investing into myself. It's one of those things where like I know whatever the cost is that I'm going to be better at the end of that program. Even if I don't achieve the goal that I want to achieve in my performance at my competition, I learn more in the journey of showing up, whatever those program sessions are. But just to think, like we were just talking about, my overhead position when I started was complete garbage. And it's not great now, but it's a lifetime better than when I started. That allows me, because I'm going through the fire myself, it allows me to be a better coach. It allows me to have more patience for my clients that I'm working with. And it also allows me to become super frustrated with those that I just want free. I just want.
And I think there's a big distinction there. Like training and coaching, those are two very different things. Like those training programs that people are talking about that you're getting for either no cost or very low cost, right? Because it's an ebook or whatever, versus coaching. And coaching, Anthony, I mean, that's what you're saying is you're developing something bespoke, like a tailored suit for that person.
Every time.
And it doesn't have to be completely bespoke, right? Because maybe there are 3/4 of it that are suitable for that person. And I just have to tailor some warm-up stuff or maybe change one lift or something. But I've still tailored it so it fits them. Whereas everyone's trying to cram their middle-aged body into these well-known workouts that maybe aren't really written for them.
Well, the other thing, we've talked about it a little bit, but the marketing. Dry Fighting Weight is a fat loss program that's clean and press. You could do a clean and press and call it something else, and it's for building power. And then you do clean and press for something else, and you're doing ladders, and it's something like you're doing the same damn thing. And clean and press is great. It's just the marketing behind this stuff is, I don't know.
Trying not to insult people.
Yeah.
I'm trying not to insult people yet. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, and I think I said it yesterday talking to you guys. Like, I can't understand why people buy fat loss programs from people who aren't lean. Like, if I want a strength program, and Tony, you said like Shaco, great guy to talk to about strength. If I want a kettlebell program, you've mentioned a bunch of really high level kettlebell coaches or guys like you, who've genuinely got proof by a real standard. Not just because someone liked them and got promoted like me, but an actual standard, like versus this marketing side of stuff. Like, really, is that the guy you want to go to for fat loss? I mean, imagine if I wrote a bodybuilding program. Why would anyone buy a bodybuilding program off me? I'm clearly not a massive dude who knows tons about bodybuilding. But if I wanted to market it that way, I'm sure I could sell it.
What I try to say to people, or like what I try to tell clients, there was an article a PT wrote about this ages ago, but I can't find it anymore, but on something called the Lindy effect. So have you heard of the Lindy effect? In short, all it means is that...
I hadn't heard... I know.
Taylor Swift has been around for 2 years.
Kettlebell coaches don't want you to know.
Yeah.
Oh, I've lost
He's coming back.
Just dropped out as you're about to leave the secret of life.
Here we go. I've got you back now. So Taylor Swift has been around only for a few years. Mozart's been around for 300 years, right? Taylor Swift likely won't be around in, say, 50 years from now, or even 20 years, even 10 years from now. But Mozart will likely be around. So the longer something has been around, Mozart's been around for 300 years, will likely be around for another 300 years. So the same thing with training. You look at all, like Hyrox, whatever the fuck that is, that's a new thing. So I saw this article on Instagram or something about the benefits of Hyrox. And in short, I think Hyrox is you do an exercise, you do like a kilometre run in between, then you do another exercise and a kilometre run. The benefits were from running.
Yeah, well, let's be honest, it's military PT in a fancy setting.
Yeah, 100%. It's in a luxury setting. I'll tell you what, the people where I live around here would love it. But yeah, so...
If you don't do Hyrox, are you even hybrid, bro?
Yeah, exactly. So 35 is dead now, and that's done and dusted. So if you look at things like martial arts, traditional weightlifting, gymnastics, those things have been around a long time. They're likely going to be around for much longer. So Don't be a fucking
That's how
moron.
I feel like yoga, kettlebells that actually predate barbells by a couple of 100 years. Body weight training, right? And some kind of endurance work, whether it's soldiers running or pack marching or something, that stuff's been around since the Romans. So you're right. I mean, some of this stuff is thousands of years old, will likely still be here in a couple of thousand years, but shake weight, probably not so much.
100%. 100%. So yeah, don't get fooled by the trends.
I think that's a really good comment. I mean, and you guys joined the kettlebell thing around the same time as me. I mean, like, wow, that was a hot topic for a few years. I think kettlebells, or not kettlebells, fitness fads are like wine. You got this period where it's on the rise, you got this period where it's at its peak, and then it tails off. And it can still make good money. But even if you mentioned Poliquin before, who's not here anymore, but there was a period where he was the hottest property in strength and conditioning
Oh yeah.
on the planet. And when he stopped doing so much articles and seminars and stuff like that, people knew who he was still, and he was probably still making a really good living and getting royalties off his books and stuff. But he wasn't as hot as he had previously been. It's not like his knowledge wasn't any good. And with the kettlebell things, I mean, probably another 10 years, they'll come back and there'll be like another major hot topic. It'll be interesting to see how it changes. But the fad in fitness is definitely the thing, and people get sucked in by it. We all get sucked in by it. I mean, even now, I can think of times. I've got a friend he's one of the top athletics coaches in Australia. Like, super duper experienced guy, was nearly an international level 3,000 meter runner himself, like very, very high level, both athlete and coach. And he still talks about, he'll see something online and be like, maybe there's something to that. Maybe, I haven't been reading research. Maybe this guy really has discovered something that I haven't heard about before. And he still gets sucked into mostly what's garbage, let's be honest. And it's interesting though, like Levi, you were talking about clean and press and clean and press and clean and press with 3 different programs with the exact same exercise. And yet for efficiency, like if we look at what most of your training is, it's very simple. Like you don't have complex looking training. And I think that's something that people get sucked into as well, is that there needs to be this massive variety of exercises. It needs to look incredibly complex, and the training, like the way it's written, needs to be complex. But the reality is it can be very simple as long as you're working hard enough.
Oh yeah. I mean, I don't need to find, the 70% of my 4 rep max in weightlifting shoes and then find 85% of my 6 rep max in my cross trainers to, go and have a great workout. It's one of those things where, like, I know what I'm trying to accomplish, and I take just a handful of movements throughout the course of the week. I write them down. I go different paces. I go different intensities with the same basic movements. And I have to, and again, I try to progress each week in building, but it doesn't always look the same, but it doesn't look very different. And it's one of those things where repetition and I'm not trying to confuse my muscles like, P90X back in the day. I want them to adapt, and I want them to grow, and I want my conditioning to improve and all that kind of stuff. And so it's just one of those things where, like, you just have to commit to the process over time. And it's never goes as fast as we want it to. It's never as easy as we think it should be. It takes as long as it takes. And as long as you're continuing to show up and put the effort, you're not going to have your best day every day. And that's okay. It's just one of those things where you've got different stresses, you've got different expectations and experiences, showing up and putting the effort in over time is what, and we just think that things will happen by just existing. And I don't know how we got there.
Well, I told a customer this morning, and he's not going to be very happy, that he thinks he's going to be in great shape in 3 to 6 months. And I said, you'll certainly be in better shape than you are now. But he's starting from a very low point. And I said, it's going to be more like 2 years before we even really see what you're capable of.
Oh, yeah.
Luckily for him, he's only 29. So he's very young compared to most of the guys I train. He's got some time. But I said, and then after we actually get you in shape to train hard, then it's going to take another 3 to 5 years to actually get you in really good shape. So, we're talking the better part of a decade for this guy to actually get in shape. And I think he was thinking, and he's a trainer, he was thinking though, like 3 to 6 months, body transformation, like to like pay for my 12-week transformation plan. We've made a good start, but that's really all it is we've made a start. And Tony, is that the same in your gym? You guys do, I'm going to say, more simple stuff, not overly complex, like no crazy percentage-based workouts and
no.
50 different exercises per session.
No, even with myself, it's funny that Levi mentioned that. The longer you've been training, the more you get to know yourself. I don't have a particular plan on what I'm going to do today. I'll just get in, do a warm-up, start to feel it out. And yeah, I'm not basing anything off percentages. It's like training, there's a science to training, but there's an art to training as well. Like it's both science and art. The science of training, it's here's this athlete in perfect conditions. He's had his 9-hour sleep and his, perfect meals and everything. Here's how they perform. But then the art of training is more like, hey, I had a shitty, the kids kept me up all night. I've got a stressful day at work ahead. I've got this niggle in my shoulder and it's just dealing with what you have. So
I often tell clients, because I don't recommend weights for anyone. Like I might, after someone's been training a while, maybe they've been lifting the same weight and I can see that they're kind of maxed out for what rep range I'm targeting. And I'll say, hey, maybe next time let's go up a weight, suggest go to this for this exercise. But I never give percentage-based lifts to people because they're not fucking robots and they don't operate on a spreadsheet. And a 50-year-old, like you said, 6 hours sleep, runs his own business, got 2 kids he's getting to sporting events, like all this stuff. That guy doesn't respond so well to the science of training, like you said. No. It's much more the art and the human side and being able to modify stuff when you get a look at them for that day.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah.
Actual coaching.
100%. And that's where a good coach, you have to be somewhere in the middle where you can see, you do, like I have some clients, I have to slow them down a bit. They're just eager, they just want to train harder and they usually, they get sloppy when they do that. They don't want to rest in between because resting is it's unproductive, right? So they want to be as productive as they can. But then on the opposite side of that, some people are just plain soft as well and you have to just, you have to, come on, get your shit together. So you've got to find that in the middle where you're not training too easy, you're not training too hard, and you've got to be able to recognize that in clients and bring it out of them.
Yeah, and you've definitely, that is such a good coaching conversation, is knowing when to kick someone and knowing when to hug them.
Yeah. So, because I have people on the other end, I'm not kidding, if I wasn't there, they'd end up doing 2 sets of 5 squats in 50 minutes. They will just sit around and stare into space and you just need to remind. So with those people, I tend to put them on time sets. So I'm like, okay, we're doing a minute of something and a minute rest and a minute of something. I'm not going to give you 4 sets of 10 because you're going to do 4 sets of 10 in half an hour.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, guys, I'm conscious of everyone's time. I know Levi's got to get going in just a couple of minutes, so we might stop here. But thank you guys so much, especially Anthony. I know you're up super early.
That's all good. We had a couple of technical glitches here.
Yeah. I was saying to Levi before you got on, I got woken up in the middle of the night because I'm sick. I've been up since 3:30. So, it's not so early for me, it feels, but I know for you, this is an early start to the day. But thank you guys for everything today. It's so interesting to me, where I started from and what was around and easy to find back then. And then you start digging into things and you realize that actually a lot of the stuff, and kettlebells particularly, I feel like is very heavily marketed, and a lot of the really useful information is really not there. When you look at the people who use kettlebells who've got the greatest abilities, it's pretty easy for me to see which camp they kind of sit in when we talk, if we want to distinguish things into styles, and yet hardstyle wins out time and time again, and yet doesn't really have any proof for it.
Yeah. This isn't to shit on them, but it's easy. It's easy to learn. It's easy to, and then if someone's telling you that you're a badass, And this is how you become somebody special. You know, it's just, and you get to feel good about yourself and someone's patting you on the back. Well, then
Yeah.
I said, I fell for it.
Pants.
It's
What's
like
that?
And you get to wear tactical pants.
it's the difference between boxer size and going to see an actual boxing coach. So
Yeah.
they can all do their boxer size,
That's
and
a great analogy.
yeah, they better hope, they can do their boxer size, but you better hope you don't, get into an altercation on the street because, the boxer size is not going to do too well.
But I'm a fourth degree black belt in boxer size.
Yeah.
I'm sure I can handle myself. Yeah. Hey, anyway, guys, that's an awesome place to stop. Thank you so much for your time today. Guys, how do people find you? Levi, what's the best place people can come and look at your stardom?
Levi's harder to kill training.com, or you can find me, on Instagram. All my socials are linked in there as well. And so that's probably the easiest.
Yeah. And Anthony, what about you, mate?
100 Strong Manly, or 100strong.com.au.
And just one shout out as well. This has got nothing to do with anything we've been talking about. I actually bought some kettlebells. It's the first time I've bought kettlebells in, like 15 years, because I used to distribute for Dragon Door. So I've still got my own set of Dragon Door bells from the very first shipment that I ever brought to Australia. But I bought some recently off Anthony because he sells his own bells, 100 Strong. They are the nicest kettlebells I think I've ever trained with. And I'm not just blowing smoke up your butt here, mate. I mean, they are absolutely beautiful if you appreciate the way gym equipment is made. So if you're in Australia and you're looking for kettlebells, go and look at Anthony's site, 100 Strong. Their kettlebells are honestly the best I've ever seen in this country.
They look good online.
Yeah.
And honestly, and again, I've seen everything, like I remember when the very first kettlebells in Australia came through, and I know the guy who was making them. I used to go around to his house because he used to just store them in his garage because he didn't have a warehouse. His business was so small, and you'd go into his living room and there'd just be boxes of kettlebells in his living room. So, I mean, I was really there right at the start. And the quality now in the 100 Strong bells, oh my God, it's amazing. So if you appreciate that and you want some kettlebells, 100 Strong has got you covered in Australia.
Yeah. We're working on the third order now. I've done 2 orders over the last 2 or 3 years, but yeah, the third order, working on it right now.
Fantastic. Awesome, guys. Thank you very much for your time, and I will speak to you guys later.
See you, boys.
See ya.